There is a new group organizing to help parents and students deal with autism. Mrs. Natalie Adair and Mr. Jerry Keller tell Trevor Spencer how Autism Speaks is helping folks in our community.
Welcome to Student Connections. I'm Trevor Spencer here with Mrs. Natalie Adair and Mr. Jerry Keller. Hi, thank you for coming today.
Hi Trevor, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Nice colored, gray. I see you two got the memo about gray.
Yes, we did.
Very good.
I got it in the mail just this morning.
Very nice.
All right, so what exactly happens at Autism Speaks?
Well, Autism Speaks is a national office that started about 5 years ago. The president of NBC at the time had a child with autism. And am I saying that right, child with autism?
Correct.
Okay. And so he wanted to find out what the causes, what the reason it happened to his son. And what he found out was that if you look into the agencies that were running autism, they had a lot of agencies and a lot of offices that raised an awful lot of money, but they were raising money to send kids to camp or to send them to a day out type of thing. And what he wanted to do is build a company, an office, a nonprofit that would look into the reasons and the warehouse and everything that was happening with getting the children education and support systems for autism. So Autism Speaks was started 5 years ago. It's now raised over $200 million, and the majority of the money goes for research, although they also do support systems and awareness. And we're opening an office here in Port Huron, Michigan. It's going to be the St. Clair office, and it's the only office of its kind in the whole country. There's a lot of Autism Speaks offices, but they're in large cities such as Chicago and Cleveland. We're doing a pilot model here in Port Huron, and if the office that we put together works really well, then we'll be opening offices in perhaps a larger city such as Grand Rapids, and if we work well there, then we'll go ahead and open an office in Detroit and then across the country. So here in St. Clair County, we have a St. Clair County office of Autism Speaks, and we also have a regional office that my boss has, and he oversees 11 states. We're very anxious. We're brand new. The concept is new, and that's why we have people like Natalie Adair to help direct us in the right, what does the county need? What can we open an office and really be successful? We're going to do the awareness, and this is part of our awareness program, is doing shows like this. We have billboards and newspapers, and we're going to have a couple events. But what we want to do is find out what does the county need, what does the state need, how can we be real supportive and follow people like Natalie, who is the educational piece to this. How do we do, Trev? Is that pretty good?
It sounds like a really good program.
It is. It's fabulous. We are brand new. We're finding our legs and what we want to do, but we have a great national office, and that my boss is here that runs the regional office is even more support for us.
Now, how do they react to socialization with strangers?
I assume you're talking about kids with autism, and the response is a tough one for me to answer because we refer to kids with autism as an autism spectrum disorder. The reason for that is it's a spectrum. The symptoms and the difficulties range from very mild for some of our individuals to very severe for others. There are 3 areas that find kids eligible under that label, under that umbrella of autism spectrum disorder. They have difficulties with socialization, behavior, and communication. So socialization definitely is an area that's not natural for them. It's not innate for them. Many things have to be taught. They have to experience it multiple times before they can really adjust to differences in situations. Okay.
Now, what is the possibility of having a child with autism?
The numbers of autism, the incident rate continues to rise. Currently, you're finding every 1 in 110 children born have autism spectrum disorder, and out of that number, every 1 in 70 will become a boy.
So from my perspective, only being with Autism Speaks for 5 weeks, I had spent 19 years with the March of Dimes. So I'm very familiar with the county and the nation dealing with numbers and incidents of childbirth with a birth defect. I'm not so aware of the numbers with autism, but what I found out as I talked to many people and letting them know that I'm now having an office here for Autism Speaks, almost everyone knows of someone who has a child with autism, and it's really surprising. So the numbers are going to get even worse as we go through this year and next year. The numbers are going to grow. To what this extent, I mean, why, I don't know, Natalie, why are we recognizing more more children with autism.
I'll answer that in just one second, Jerry. I just wanted to add, in 1990, school-age children, in kindergarten through 12th grade, we had 15 students who received special education supports and services for children with autism spectrum disorder. Here, in 2011, we have over 200 students who receive special education services and supports. So a very large increase, like a 600% increase in numbers all across the nation. That's not just in Michigan or area. So we're seeing a sharp rise. What is the cause? That's the million-dollar question. That's what everybody's working. That's the role of Autism Speaks, raising funds to do a lot of research. We do know that there is a genetic, biological, environmental link somehow, some way, but we continue to look for what is that definite answer. They continue to narrow it down, but we definitely have not reached that pinpoint, and that's one area that the work of Autism Speaks is so critical for.
And what we have done here, because I'm not an educator such as Natalie, but what we put together is what we think is a fabulous group of community board members. We have people from the ARC, from RISA, from Woodland Schools, from St. Clair Community Mental Health that are on the board that will help direct our office and where we want to go and try to correct some of the problems that we can deal with. But it's professionals like Natalie that will be able to help us, give us the input so we can build a support system for these families.
Now, what age can you usually find out that a kid has autism?
You know, and that's a really tough question. We don't say at age 5 you only have autism, or at age 18 you only have autism. It's a spectrum disorder. A lot varies depending on, again, the severity of your signs and symptoms. We hear conversations and stories from many families who say, my kid was perfectly fine, they were typical, they were progressing at age 2, and overnight the next morning they're not speaking. We have other families who say, you know, he's just struggled with making friends, and they don't find out a medical diagnosis or a school eligibility until 8th grade or until their teenage years. So again, it's not it only happens at this age. It depends on how they progress through those developmental milestones and what part impacts them more, behavior, communication, or socialization opportunities.
I had just met with a mother, Natalie, and I think I shared this with you. I just met with a mother that told me that she had a 2.5-year-old child, and for 2.5 years the child got up every morning, hugged her, kissed her, told her, I love you, mommy, had a good vocabulary, 200-300 words. And one morning she woke up and she's never talked to her kid since, never been hugged. The child has never looked at her, and the child now is 17 years old. So it was from one morning to the next morning, the child was a normal, raised 2.5-year-old, and for the last 14.5 years hasn't talked to his mother, haven't looked at her, haven't hugged her. And those things are just gut-wrenching. Those are terrible, terrible experiences.
Now, what does Autism Speaks do to collect money, like with fundraisers and stuff?
Well, I'm glad you asked. We do have a fundraiser coming up. We're going to have 2 fundraisers this year. One is going to be a radiothon, and we're going to have that early in December. And we have some neat things to auction off. And one of the things we're going to auction off is a trip on a lake freighter. So we're going to raise some money doing a radiothon. And then we're going to have another event at the YMCA. And at the YMCA, we're going to have a awareness room, I guess we'd call it. It's going to be an awareness room where people with children with autism can come and get information. People who would like information on it can get it, as well as we're bringing in a sports figure at the YMCA to come and put on an event there as well. And that will be December 10th. And the money that's going to come from that, is that what you were going to ask me? Well, I'm glad you asked. The money that we're going to raise from this particular fundraising event will go to help to buy educational materials that will stay right here in St. Clair County.
Now, you sure didn't get a copy of the questions, because you predicted that pretty good.
Trevor, I'm trying to follow you along.
Is the research finding any answers to the cause of autism? Like, are you making any progress?
Progress continues to be made. It also depends on what type of research or what research group you continue to follow. We definitely are finding genetic and familial links. We find lots of families that have multiple children with autism spectrum disorder within their family. But I'm not a researcher, so is it tomorrow or is it still light years away? But they are definitely working very hard at trying to pinpoint what is making this reaction or this reality come to light for many of these families, unfortunately.
If I can, Trevor, I'd like to make the difference. Being with the March of Dimes for 19 years, and the March of Dimes is a physical problem, and that they're born with either premature or birth defect or something. This is so much different. Autism is so much different. It's a mental disorder. It's so hard to put your finger on things. When it's a physical, you can actually see the problems. You can see a cleft palate, or someone who's got to wear glasses, or someone who's going to be in a wheelchair. This autism is it's so much different because you can't really put your finger on it, and being a mental disorder, you don't have a lot of answers, and you can't get the answers from the children. They just don't know how to answer you. If you have a child that's 6 years old and has a birth defect, they at least can communicate with you. Here, the autistic child just can't do that.
Trevor, if I could add, what I think is difficult is it's often called the silent disorder. They look normal, they walk normal. It's just their behavioral actions, their social emotional response to environmental stimuli or situations out there. So it's very difficult for many families who may be out in a local community event, might be at a local shopping center, and their child has a behavioral disability, and parents look at them as if they're bad parents or they're not taking care of their child well. It is part of it. It's a neurobiological lifelong disability. Their brain works differently, it's wired differently, it acts differently, and that's really hard for many people on the outside. We judge it as if, come on parents, can't you control your child? And it's nothing they've ever done, it's not something they haven't done. It's just the way that child is genetically wired.
Are there materials and resources available to new parents so they can get to learn more about autism, what they can do?
That's why we're opening an office here. We want to be the provider of educational materials and also be able to direct those people to people like Natalie and professionals who will be able to assist them or lead them to the right area. Autism Speaks, we hope to have a lot of health materials available within the next month or two, and then we will do a lot of awareness stuff to let people know that they can come to our office, which is in 309 Huron Avenue, downtown Port Huron. That's where we're located. So we will have a lot of health materials. But people like Natalie, they already have a handle on where to go get those things. We want to be the clearinghouse for all the other different agencies that they work with. Joanne Wilton at the ARC and Jill Klein, all these wonderful people we have on our board. Uh-oh, I didn't mention somebody. I should never do this, right?
Don't start.
No, we have a lot of wonderful people on this board that we put together in a short period of time. Dr. Dan Wilhelm and a lot of good people that can help these families get some of the answers. And Natalie's been at the forefront, and her people that she worked with, they've been working on this for years. We just want to be able to put this together, be a clearinghouse, and make sure that these people get to the right structure for them.
How have educational opportunities increased for autistic students in the past few years?
You know, that's a great question. It's one that I'm pretty passionate about as an educator. What we say is, we're all kids, and all kids first, and we say they're general education students first. While they may have a special education eligibility or receive special education supports and services, they're a general education student first. The law says that we clearly have to put them within their least restrictive environment. So where can they perform to the best of their ability, and what accommodations or modifications do we need to add to that support to make them be successful? You definitely see back in the early days, those kids were institutionalized, they were hospitalized, they were not let out of those things. You know, around 1970, they were deinstitutionalized and we were pushing them back into society. We've really had to change that. How do we service these kids and what does it look like? Many of our children are extremely intelligent, very, very smart, but the way they do it is, how do we access that information? They may not do it in the typical way, in the typical manner, so we've had to do what universal design for learning? How can we access the information and how can they share and show us what they know? Opportunities have really increased, and we continue to say they're general education students first. Let's put them in front of general education opportunities and devise individualized supports via special education to make them be successful.
And one of the other side of the coin problem is when you have an autistic child, he is an autistic adult and so on. So when you become older in your life, who's going to take care of your adult autistic child? It becomes a real problem. So parents have a lot on their minds, not that they just have a child with autism, but that child will become an adult, and what you do with that child when you're too old to take care of your child. And a mother and a father always loves their children. There's no age limit. It's still your child. So that's one of the problems that autistic families have to deal with.
Well, thank you. I wish the best of luck to your program. It sounds like a great program.
Thanks for your time.
And we'll be back more after this.